Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. Today I have some very good news because we're going to be discussing one of the most frequently asked questions that I have ever gotten asked on my YouTube career. And this has to do with why are companies becoming woke? A lot of you guys are constantly asking, like, why do companies push for certain political issues when it's fairly obvious that their own customers don't seem to appreciate it? As well as why are certain companies being hypocritical about the issues they push. The most famous case being a lot of companies putting up the rainbow flag during Pride Month, but failing to do so in parts of the world where it's actually needed. Like they will not put the rainbow flag in Middle Eastern nations, they will not do it in Russia. As well as other companies that talk a big talk about democracy and how important it is to preserve it, but at the same time, they turn a blind eye when they see abuses being done in other nations where they're working in. For example, in China, when China cracks down on the people from Hong Kong, the same companies that care about democracy not only fail to talk about it or address it, but they will even silence people from their own company that are trying to raise awareness of it. So, in order to answer this difficult question, you have to realize that, like many things in life, it's not a simple answer. The reality is that there is a series of vectors that are pushing corporations to be woke. So I'll only address the most important ones. And one of the most important ones has to do with investors. If you want money to be flowing into your company, if you want people to invest in it, you have to follow what is called an ESG score. You see, we live now in an age of information, where you have 24-hour news cycles on television, where you have access to social media, and everything every person does, every company does, is being logged in a computer, and the internet is forever. And with that abundance of information, activists have managed to profit from this, and as such, investors realize that they have a responsibility towards society. Now, the word responsibility here is being used in a very disingenuous way, because responsibility implies that if you fail to meet that responsibility, then there is punishment. For example, if a child is responsible to be feeding a cat, if the cat ends up dead, then the child gets punished. These corporations do not get punished for failing to meet their responsibility. In other words, in this situation, responsibility is a very nice PR way of saying that the companies realize that they can extend their area of influence outside their scope, and they can do a massive power grab in order to shape society into the way that they like. Now, these companies that I'm talking about are the finance sector, Wall Street, investors and bankers who realized that by strategically investing into whatever companies they choose for, they can also push for political change in a society. So, how does this investment work? Well, it's all about the ESG score that I spoke about before. E stands for environmentalism, S stands for social, and G stands for governance. So, with the overflow of information, everything a company does is going to be monitored by activists and third-party sources, and is then going to be turned into a number that is going to show how woke a company is. E stands for environmentalism. So, if a company makes a lot of ads that talks about the importance of fighting against climate change, if they make a lot of ads talking about how much they care about the environment, or if they actually make statements promoting famous environmentalist activists, like for example Greta Thunberg, or if they tell their employees that they get a free weekend off to go to a seminar where they're going to be lectured on the wasteful capitalism and how important it is to fight against pollution, all of these things raises their environmental score. If the company, however, gets to be criticized for its bad environmental practices, or it would actually like speak against an environmentalist activist, or be perceived to fund a politician that is against environmentalism, And all of these things will lower its environmentalism score. The second one is social. Now, social is all about the working conditions, the equal opportunities, how diverse your board of directors is, what is your policy on health and safety for the employees, what is your statement on social issues. So again, this has to do with the ads. If a company like, for example, Gillette makes a very woke ad where they take a stand against toxic masculinity, this is going to raise their social score. If they talk about how diverse their workers are and how diverse their board is, then that raises their social score. As usual, if they give money to a politician that is viewed as a progressive individual who cares about society and improving the social standards of people, then that raises their social score. While if they don't do any of these things, that lowers this number. And finally, we got governance, and governance is also about like what politicians they donate money towards. If they're being viewed that they skim on taxes, that will lower this number. But if they're being viewed as doing activism for the rich to pay more, then that raises their number, and so on and so forth. Now, the reason most people dislike this system is that people accurately notice that companies don't really care about ESG. What companies care is to be perceived that they have a high ESG score. And being perceived to have a high ESG score usually makes companies that in reality would have it a very lower score to actually score higher than companies that do care about the environment. For example, Tesla has a very low ESG score, despite the fact that they are making electric cars, which all of the activists are promoting. All of the activists are saying we need to move towards electric vehicles to save Mother Gaia. I think Tesla has like a 35% ESG score, like it's incredibly low. But when you look at other corporations like shoe manufacturers or companies that actually do create plastic and they're polluting and whatnot, they can have a high ESG score just because they're saying the correct thing. So it's all about performance. It's all about pretending to care about certain issues. It's not really whether or not you care. For example, Pride Month is the really good way of grinding that ESG score. So during Pride Month, if you put on a rainbow flag, if you say the correct things, if you manage to participate within the LGBT marches and whatnot, then your ESG score goes up. Failure to do so means that your ESG score gets to be stagnant while all the other companies are grinding this number all the way up, and it's going to make you gain less investors. And it's not just about the investors, by the way, it's how other companies deal with you, because you can get a low ESG score just by trading with a company that has a low one, right? So that is why a lot of people dislike this. Another reason why people dislike this system is because in the past, we had the Milton Friedman way of doing capitalism. And the Milton Friedman way of doing capitalism, corporations were focused mostly on making money. Now, at the top of corporations, you had individuals, which of course wanted to be perceived by society that they are good people. And they would have to use religion in order to do that, because religion would show you the path of being a virtuous person. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that you had to worship Jesus or go to Sunday church, even though like some of these people would do so. But what it meant is that they would usually donate money for the homeless. They would donate money for the orphanages. They would donate money for housing projects, or like things that would genuinely help the needy in a community. Nowadays, woke corporations don't do that. Woke corporations donate money towards activists. They donate money towards NGOs so that they can get a little bit of a tax exemption. And you end up with companies donating massive amounts of money to organizations like BLM or organizations like Greta Thunberg. And most of this money doesn't actually end up going to the needy on the ground. This type of money usually ends up for the activists that are at the top to be able to create large mansions, as well as for various commercial purposes. Sometimes it goes into the pockets of politicians, and very little money actually is being donated to charity now. Very little money manages to actually go to the people on the ground and to the needy. And this is the Stakeholder capitalism is the economic forum way of doing business. It's what Klaus Schwab is suggesting, that companies that don't stand on the side of the ESG, they're on the wrong side of history, while governments who don't increase their ESG number are going to also be on the wrong side of history. So people like Klaus Schwab are advocating even for governments to care about their ESG scores. Okay, so this is like the number one reason why companies are woke, and it's got to do mostly with investing. But again, as I mentioned before, the way this works is that if you're a company and you're dealing a lot of business, or you're cozying up to companies that have lower ESG score than you, then that affects your prestige. So this is the number one reason. Another reason why companies go woke has to do with hiring practices. Now, this is mostly to do with entertainment companies, and mostly corporations that are in California now. Like, we're talking about video gaming companies, we're talking about comic books. Now, what's interesting about these companies is that, from my understanding, and I've been told by this from people who actually worked at these companies, is that in California you have a law that if your company is bigger than a certain number of people, so if you have like over an X% amount of employees, then you need to have an HR department. Like, you're forced by law to have an HR department. And it's not enough to just have an HR department and hire anyone you want. No, you need to have an HR department and hire someone that actually finished a university, which gave them a license to be able to work in this industry. And these universities, they're highly focused on grievance studies. They're highly woke. They're talking all about diversity, inclusion, equity, and all of that. So once you have a person that has a specific mindset of the world, where they believe that America is evil, capitalism is bad, and you need to dismantle everything, that person is going to do the hirings based on their worldview. I don't think it's controversial to suggest that if you were to put a rabid fundamentalist Christian in charge of hiring for a company and deciding who gets promoted, who gets fired, who gets erased, who gets punished, if you make that type of person in charge of a company, then that company is going to have like a completely different company culture, and is going to hire completely different people than a company that has a radical, left-leaning progressive in charge of doing all of those things. And this is why, because now you have people that are hiring based on politics, and they're hiring based on the perceived, performance that an employee displays on social media, rather than his merit and his talent. Most of these people who finish these universities, they're trained to believe that merit doesn't even exist, right? Think about it this way. If you believe that all art is subjective, right? You don't believe that a piece of art can be better than another art because it's just up to the viewer's interpretation. And with this mindset, you are working at the hiring for a comic book company, right? Then if you believe all art is subjective, how can you tell that this artist, this comic book artist, is better than this comic book artist? For you, all of them are the same. It doesn't really matter who you're hiring. So how can you hire them? Well, you're now going to hire them based on their personal ESG score. Like what they personally say on Twitter. Do they support the correct political candidates? Do they care about the environment? Do they care about other political issues? Like, for example, what voting law gets passed in Georgia and whatnot, right? So when you have this mindset and you're hiring people based on that, you're less likely going to care about the quality of a person's work, because it's all subjective, right? That doesn't matter. So this is why you notice a lot of entertainment companies going hyper woke, because you get higher ESG score by advertisements. And if you're a company that produces culture, then the ESG score is going to be even more affected by what you're producing, the type of movies that you produce, the type of content that you put out. It's hyper criticized. And this is why, for example, the Oscars are the way they are. And you get to see movies that no one has watched winning the Best Picture award, because that movie in itself might not be good. The story might not be as captivating as other movies like The Lord of the Rings or Titanic, movies that won the Best Picture award in the past. But it may fit the correct message. It has the correct focus on the ESG. So that's why the main reason why corporations get woke. It's because of the investors, it's because of the hiring practices. And this is why you get to see Eastern European gaming companies that are making excellent games, or Japanese companies that are making excellent games, or anime or manga, because they don't have to deal with this bullshit. And what also ends up happening is that you have certain corporations that also don't want to deal with this bullshit, and they move their manufacturing overseas. They move their manufacturing into third world countries, or they move their manufacturing into authoritarian countries like China or places in Africa. And they can abuse their workers there. They can bypass like all of the working laws that we have here. They can pollute as much as they want there. And then when they sell their product here, they can still be viewed as having high ESG scores. Why? Because they do all the bad shit behind the curtain. They do all the bad shit somewhere else where the activists don't see, where the freedom of information isn't as overflowing as it is here. And by doing so, they manage to bypass the ESG, and they can have a higher ESG than Tesla, right? So that is why corporations are going woke. That is why people don't like it. They view it as a fake facade. They view it as we live in a time where it's all about performance. It's all about pretending to be someone you're not. A very fake culture, a very fake plastic people type of society that is constantly being encouraged almost everywhere you go. Doesn't really matter what you think, doesn't really matter who you are or what you do. It matters more about what you say. I even had someone saying on Twitter that in this society, like the worst type of human scum, like a pedophile, can actually be viewed with more prestige than a person that has said the sexist joke, right? So as long as the first person manages to put on a good performance and pretend, like I've been rehabilitated, I'm not like that anymore, but now I care about the environment, I care about social issues, I care about, democracy, they can actually be viewed in a better light than someone like Alex Jones. And in fact, you also need to take into account that people like Alex Jones are banned from almost all social medias, while a person that just finished his sentence coming out from prison can still use social media as he sees fit. And that is a very sad thing, that is like how the morals of society have shifted away from what they used to be to something completely new, and why a lot of people are resisting this change because they do not consent. They never were asked if they want to live in such a society, which is mostly about logging everything you do, all the informations you do get to stay on a computer forever, and they are now being turned into a score, a number, which says if you're a good person or not. Let me know what you guys think, and I'll see you in the comment section. Take care.